Which player's value is skyrocketing heading into the fantasy playoffs? I'm about to tell you. Hey, welcome back, Endgame community. It's Chris. Today I'm going to talk about some players whose value is absolutely skyrocketing coming out of week 14, heading into week 15, into the fantasy football playoffs. These are guys who could help you not only in week 15, but beyond as you advance. So let's get into it. All right, let's start at running back, and let's start with Tony Pollard. Dude has been on an absolute heater of late. He has 20 or more PPR points in 5 of the last 6 games, and that even includes games where Ezekiel Elliott has had big games. This running team right now, this running, offense is just on fire at the moment, and it doesn't even matter. Like, Tony Pollard isn't getting crazy volume. He hasn't pulled away from Ezekiel Elliott. In fact, in week 14, he had 5 fewer carries and the same number of targets as Ezekiel Elliott, and it didn't matter. He went nuclear anyways. He is just going off. He looks explosive. He looks great with the ball in his hands. He's a guy who obviously doesn't need a ton of touches, and now here in week 15, gets a smash matchup with Jacksonville. Look, Tony Pollard has carried some teams into the fantasy playoffs down the stretch, maybe some teams that are on the bubble. I think he's going to keep carrying teams. If you've got him, congrats. Should smash in week 15 and at least carry you to the semifinals, if not all the way to the championship. And there was some worry with Zonovan Knight, with Michael Carter coming back. Would it be his backfield still? Would it be more of a split? But it definitely looks like it's mostly Zonovan Knight's backfield. He did outtouch him significantly, Michael Carter that is, but really only in the carry department, right? Had 17 carries, Michael Carter only 5. Unfortunately, the downside here is Michael Carter did have the bulk of the targets, but still, any running back getting the amount of work that Zonovan Knight is getting right now, and especially a running back with fresh legs like him who looks good, is worth almost starting almost every single week. Now, I'm not going to say he's like Tony Pollard, a guy who can carry your team, but he's a solid running back too with upside, and the Jets have a great playoff schedule with Detroit, Jacksonville, and Seattle. Every one of those, none of those matchups should scare you away from Zonovan Knight at all. So if you added him on waiver wire, a couple weeks ago, you should be feeling very good. It looks like he's at least the lead back, in a somewhat of a split backfield, but not too much of a split backfield. And it should remain that way from now till the end of the season. So Zonovan Knight should continue to help fantasy teams throughout the playoffs. And then one of my all-time favorites, Jerick McKinnon. If you've been playing fantasy for as long as me or longer, you know this guy. Incredible athlete, incredible talent. We've seen it in spurts back when he was with Minnesota. Then, of course, when it's San Francisco. Then even last year with the Chiefs when they went on that playoff run. We've seen what Jerick McKinnon can do. We've seen his ability. We've seen his talent. That has never been the issue. It's always been the health and the durability. But he has a great role in this Chiefs offense right now as kind of the pass catching back. Over the last 2 games, he has 14 and 32 PPR points. That will absolutely play. That will absolutely get it done. And look, the Chiefs have a great first 2 playoff matchups with Houston and then Seattle. He could absolutely, have big games again in this one, because this is a guy kind of like Tony Pollard. He doesn't need huge volume. He doesn't need a ton of touches. Get this guy out in space and he can hit a home run at any moment. So if you're in deeper leagues or you're desperate at running back, go see if Jerick McKinnon is on your waiver wire. Wouldn't even hurt to start him this week against Houston, in deeper leagues. But definitely somebody to stash and put on your bench and see how he does once again in week 15. And then finally, I guess I have to talk about J.K. Dobbins. For the second time this year, he returned from injury and had a huge game. If you remember last time when he returned from injury, he didn't have so many huge games after that one huge game. We'll see what he does going forward, but I have to mention him because it's the end of the season. There's not a lot of guys on the waiver wire like J.K. Dobbins. He's coming off a major knee injury. Not only a major knee injury, a major knee injury that he had a setback on during the season and had to have a procedure done on. So he's basically coming off 2 major knee injuries within the last year. But in this offense, he always has touchdown upside. He does get Cleveland in week 15, so that could at least make him playable here in week 15. But I still have my worries going forward. I don't know if you saw that big run or if you've seen the highlights of it, but it looks like he's barely using that left leg, barely using that left knee. And of course, anytime, and we've seen it already earlier in the season, when you come back from these significant knee injuries, you're always at risk for a soft tissue or some other type of injury. So Again, kind of like Jerick McKinnon. I don't think he's going to win people leagues, but there's just not a lot of running backs like J.K. Dobbins out there that you could be picking up this time of the year. And we know when he's healthy, or at least healthy enough, he's going to be the lead back in this offense. Gets a great matchup in week 15. So definitely somebody, not going to say don't grab him or don't add him. Definitely a lot of risk here, but definitely a lot of upside as well. All right, let's go to wide receiver, and I'll start with a couple of Charger wide receivers, and we got to start with Keenan Allen, looking like the guy we've known him to be the past 4 or 5 years, just an absolute PPR stud, has 20 or more points in back-to-back PPR games. Remember, came back from that injury, 4 weeks ago now, I guess, and has only gotten better in every single game, and we saw it on that Sunday night game. Anytime Justin Herbert needed somebody to make a play, he was looking for Keenan Allen. He should continue to be an absolute beast going forward throughout the entire fantasy playoffs. And the Chargers get another incredible matchup this week against Tennessee. So if you got Keenan Allen, just keep rolling with him throughout the playoffs. He should be in every week, no doubt, must start. And we got to talk about his teammate, Mike Williams. Talk about coming back with a vengeance from an injury. 6 catches, 116 yards, and a touchdown. Look, the worry here with Mike Williams was just, would he stay healthy throughout the whole game? Because the last time we saw him come back from this ankle injury, he re-injured the ankle. But he got through the game fine. He looked great. He looked tremendous. And like I said with Keenan Allen, Tennessee this week, the biggest pass funnel defense in the entire league. A team you want to attack through the air. You got to think the Chargers are going to throw it a ton. They're going to decimate this team through the air. He's got true week winning upside. He is a guy who can absolutely win you matchups in the fantasy playoffs. If you got Mike Williams, you must play him in week 15, if not every single week going forward. Now let's talk about quite possibly one of the most underrated wide receivers in the entire league, and that is Devonta Smith. Look, last year had a great rookie season, and no one really noticed. No one seemed to notice that he had such a good rookie season. This year he has taken a major leap, but he's kind of, been overshadowed by A.J. Brown, even though in a lot of games this year, Devonta Smith has been better than A.J. Brown. Over the last 2 games, has 8 targets in each of those games. He's averaging over 19 points per game in PPR leagues over the last 2 games. Sure, A.J. Brown is the 1A here, but Devonta Smith is the 1B. This is not a wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 situation. This is a 1A, 1B situation. This is a great offense. Jalen Hurts probably going to be the MVP this year. You want a piece of this offense if you can get it. Devonta Smith, to me, is an every week must-start wide receiver 2 with tremendous weekly upside, who's going to carry a lot of teams when it matters most in the fantasy playoffs here. Now let's go a little deeper here to Donovan Peoples-Jones. Has 13 and 19 PPR points in the 2 games with Deshaun Watson. Now granted, in Deshaun Watson's first game, he didn't rack up a ton of targets, but he had a nice game. He had a late touchdown. But then what did we see in week 14? He had a huge game. 12 targets, 8 catches, 114 yards. Not going to say he's the number 1 over Amari Cooper right now, but there's obviously a connection with him and Deshaun Watson. And now finally, the Browns get to go home here in week 15 to face the Baltimore Ravens, who are a very good run defense, but a very poor passing defense. I think Deshaun Watson gets better here in week 15, and I think Donovan Peoples-Jones will be a big beneficiary of that. Another guy who might still be on your waiver wire or just stash on your bench, who's a guy, we see it every year, these surprise performances late in the season that help people win. Wouldn't hate it if you put this guy in your lineup in week 15 with everything on the line. I think he's got the upside to help you win your week. And then another really deep guy that, was kind of forgotten for most of the season because he was injured is DJ Chark. He's got 13 targets, 11 catches, 192 yards, and a touchdown over the last 2 games. Jared Goff has been balling out. This offense has been balling out. Now, the only downside here for DJ Chark is in week 15, he's got a brutal matchup against the New York Jets on the road in New York. That is terrifying. Then they have to go on the road to Carolina. Another tough matchup, right? Carolina, J.C. Horn, they've got a good secondary there. But still, the way Jared Goff and this offense is rolling right now, I think DJ Chark is at least worth a look in deeper leagues. Obviously, you should not need to play DJ Chark, in like a 10-man type of league, but in deep 12, 14 or deeper leagues, definitely take a look at DJ Chark because the opportunity is there, and this guy can hit a home run on any given play. It's what he does. He's their deep threat. So DJ Chark looking like one of those guys that was picked up late in the season that's going to help teams win when it matters. All right, let's move on to tight end, which is an absolute wasteland right now, but we do have a couple of guys who may be helping teams at the right time, and let's start with Evan Engram. 14 points 2 weeks ago, 39 points in week 14, by far the best game of his career. Set his career highs in targets, receptions, yards, and touchdowns in that game. Can't expect that going forward, of course, because look, we got to remember in the 3 games prior to this 2-game run, he had 8 combined PPR points. So we know like he's on a heater right now. You want to ride it however long it lasts. Trevor Lawrence, another quarterback that is balling out down the stretch, starting to look like the number 1 pick that he should have been. There's definitely risk here with Engram, and he does have a couple tough matchups coming up with Dallas and the Jets to start the fantasy playoffs, but still, given the state of the tight end position, a guy with the upside of Evan Engram, I think you just have to put him in your lineup, cross your fingers, and hope he goes off, because that's really what it takes at the tight end position. There's so many tight ends getting 5, 6 points. You might as well gamble on a guy with tremendous upside. And then this guy hasn't been just the biggest surprise at tight end. He might be the biggest surprise in all of fantasy football, and that is Chig Okonkwo, a name that I bet you probably hadn't heard of prior to maybe 3 weeks ago, because he really hadn't done anything, right? He's an athletic freak, but really hadn't been worked into this offense. And then we saw a few weeks ago, started to kind of get some steam. Then Treylon Burks got hurt in that game, and he led the team in receiving that game. And then what did we see last week without Treylon Burks? Had a great game, scored a touchdown, had a 2-point conversion. It looks like he's kind of the guy there, probably behind Treylon Burks when he is healthy. But look at the rest of this Tennessee offense as far as the passing game goes. I mean, Robert Woods, Nick Westbrook-Akine, there's not a lot of pass catchers on this team, and that's a great thing for Chig because it means more targets and more opportunities, and he's making the most of those, which means he's only going to get more and more opportunities. So again, with the way the tight end landscape is right now, why not shoot for the upside of a guy like Chig? It doesn't make sense to play, a tight end that's going to get you 5, 6, 7 points when Chig can probably get you 5, 6, 7 points and has the upside for much more. So another tight end, kind of waiver wire savior here at the end of the season. That's certainly going to help a lot of teams when it matters. And then finally at quarterback, after really being underwhelming for pretty much all the season, Justin Herbert is finally looking like that top 5 QB that you drafted who's going to help carry your fantasy team. Over the last 4 games, he hasn't scored less than 18 fantasy points, and he finally has everybody healthy. For the first time all year against the Dolphins, we saw this offense fully healthy. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, even Josh Palmer, Gerald Everett, Austin Eckler out of the backfield. He has so many weapons, and he gets a great playoff schedule with Tennessee, Indy, who is fairly good against the pass, but not a shutdown defense, and the Rams, who have just fallen off the face of the earth this year, definitely vulnerable against the pass. Justin Herbert could absolutely be a top 5 quarterback from now till the end of the season. Didn't get what you drafted him for the first, 10 or so weeks, but finally going to happen at the end when it matters. And I already talked about Jared Goff, but let's talk about Jared Goff again because he is on fire right now. 17 or more fantasy points in 3 straight games, 20 or more fantasy points in the last 2 games. Has looked great. The offense is looking great. He also has weapons back, right? DJ Chark talked about him. Even Josh Reynolds. Of course, Amon-Ra St. Brown. DeAndre Swift, when they let him play. Who knows when that is. But he's got weapons in this offense. Now, the downside here for Jared Goff is what I talked about with DJ Chark. He's got to go on the road against the Jets this week. They did a great job against Josh Allen. They've done a great job against every passing offense. I'm not sure you want to trust Jared Goff in week 15. But assuming he comes out of that and looks at least fairly decent, then you could probably feel pretty confident about him rest of the season. So probably not a guy you should necessarily need in a 1 QB league, but in your 2 QB Superflex leagues, Jared Goff looks like he's going to help teams, down the stretch, carry them potentially to a championship. And then I said Chig Okonkwo might be the biggest surprise of all of fantasy. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe it's Brock Purdy just stepping into this 49ers offense, and this offense not missing a beat. This guy has just stepped in and taken over, for Jimmy G, like Jimmy G never left. This offense is still rolling. He's got weapons. Even when Deebo Samuel went out, he kept rolling, throwing a touchdown to Brandon Ayuk. Didn't stop him. Running in a touchdown. You love to see that. You love to see that he can actually use his legs. No, he's not like Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts or Josh Allen or anything, but he can use his legs enough to give you some bit of a rushing upside here. So again, kind of like Jared Goff, not a guy you should be needing to start in a single QB league. I mean, I hope you're not starting him in a single QB league. But in your 2 QB Superflex leagues, if you were able to grab him off waiver wire after the Jimmy G injury, it looks like you have a potential, every week QB2 who can carry your team and give you that high floor with a relatively high ceiling as well. All right, now you know some players with skyrocketing values heading into week 15. What about who to start, who to sit, who to get off waivers, everything you need to win this matchup and keep your season alive? We got you covered. Check out our week 15 playlist right here.